Hey everyone, my name is John Meldrum, and you are listening to the Brave Dad Now podcast, where we're seeking to inspire and uplift men and dads around the world to be their best selves. Today is episode 5, titled Parenting Styles: How to Not Strangle Your Kids When They Are Naughty. We're going to be talking about some different parenting styles that I have personally experienced as a kid, and then we're going to dive into my own parenting styles as a modern 2018 father, and talk about kind of the differences of how I was brought up versus parenting styles nowadays, and just to give my own perspective on it and how it's changed since my divorce. So we'll go ahead and kick things off with how I was raised. So a little background story about me. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and I was the youngest of 7 kids, and I grew up in a very conservative Mormon family, and there were 4 boys and 3 girls, so you can imagine there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of things happening all the time, and my parents are baby boomers, and they are definitely a product of their generation, and their parenting style definitely reflects that. So that means that when I was growing up, there was spanking, there was kicking, there were boots involved, there were paddles. Didn't have to do the belt, but I wouldn't put it past my parents. if they did, maybe my subconscious blocked that out. And I've been drugged across the floor. Ears flicked, hairs, pulled, smacked around on the head. Things that if I were to tell my friends that I did to my kids nowadays, they'd look at me like, whoa, we need to call Child Protective Services on you, because that is not okay. But I look back on it, and there are some good and bad things about that, and I will definitely dive into that in just a sec. So that was kind of the atmosphere that I grew up in. And, I don't look at my parents, well, how could I put this? You could use the argument that it is right or wrong, but I look at it more of a survival technique. When you come home from work and there are 7 kids and they are all running around being crazy, they're yelling, they're screaming, there's fighting going on. Sometimes you just have to go to to the last resort on your parenting skills, and that's just to get physical. So I understand the why. I don't agree with it, but I understand where my parents came from in that respect. Full disclaimer, I love my parents and I have a good relationship with them today, but I will say I don't agree with their parenting style. And here's why. So because my parents were, they demanded respect, they demanded good behavior through fear and intimidation of the consequences of what would happen. What that ended up doing is it actually gave me a really bad case of anxiety. And I'm not just talking about like, oh my gosh, I'm having a rough day, or things aren't going my way, and I'm, just feeling kind of down. This is like full on, like my body is just tensed up, and I'm physically unable to function or take care of myself. Or you're just worried about this punishment that's going to come your way. I mean, really, it's the fear of God when you see your parents just at the end of the rope and ready just to tear you to pieces. And so growing up, all of my siblings actually have anxiety issues and stress issues and depression issues because of it, different degrees, and we've all coped with it in our different ways, but it really affected us, and we talk about it to this day like, wow, I'm kind of messed up a little bit because our parents were just so aggressive with their parenting style. So with that, I learned a lot from what they've done, and I choose not to use that parenting style today. So again, I don't blame my parents, but I will say that I'm going to do things differently, and I'll kind of give you move on to the next phase and explain the reasoning for that. So when I went through my divorce, I was on my own. And what that meant was I had to do everything on my own, including parenting my kids. And the interesting thing from a dad perspective, I didn't realize this at the time, but discipline and kid management was largely done by my ex-wife, as was a lot of things. And I really was not an equal partner in our relationship. And child management, wrangling, discipline was no exception. And so when everything was up to me, that meant I had to figure out how to manage the kids and how to discipline them and how to, get them to do things or not do things. And so guess what my default parenting style was when I started being on my own? Yep, you guessed it. Exactly like my parents. Physical, explosive. I was reacting and just getting straight to option Z, going to the very end of the list and just saying, "Rah, go to your room," or I'm gonna smack you around. Or sometimes I wouldn't even say anything. I would just go up and spank him. And so yes, I actually did use physical discipline when I was starting out on my own. And what was interesting to me was that we deal with anxiety in a lot of different ways. And I didn't realize this, but what was happening was I was using anger as a release. Parenting kids on your own gives you so much anxiety. And when I wasn't able to manage myself and my anxiety and what was happening, it would be overwhelming. And so I would go over and, just deal with the situation by spanking them. And then it was done. It was over. Right? Good job. Job's done. No more anxiety. Well, that wasn't what was happening. I was just repeating the same bad habits and parenting styles of my parents. And what really did it for me, what really did it for me was there was one instance where my son actually pushed my daughter down the stairs and she fell about a good 3 steps. And, I was livid. I just flipped out. Luckily, I caught my daughter before she got severely hurt. But my son was in for it. He knew he knew he was in trouble. He could feel the punishment coming his way. And what happened was I looked into his eyes and I saw fear. And in that moment, I was absolutely crushed. I knew that I couldn't continue the parenting style I was using. I knew that I couldn't keep using physical discipline as a means to fix the situation. And so I knew that I had to change because I did not want my son to grow up being afraid of me and to have anxiety just like me. And I wanted him to have a better life and just a more healthy, balanced mental capacity and emotional state. So that was the first, and I want to say the last time, or not the first and last time, but that was the moment, there we go, the moment where I decided to not use physical discipline anymore. And it was hard. I've had to use it just a few more times, like I don't know, 4 or 5 more times when they were being really naughty. But I never used it out of aggression. It was never a quick fix. It was never out of anger. It was out of a sincere desire to correct the behavior. And I've tried very hard to use different parenting tactics and techniques so that way, again, that my kids don't have that anxiety and fear of me. So how did it go? Well, when I started transitioning, I noticed that I started using timeouts a lot more. And you might think that I was using the timeouts for my kids, but honestly, I think timeouts are more for parents, to be honest with you, because I want to just strangle my kids when they're fighting and they're all over each other and there's just yelling and screaming and pulling hair and teeth biting. And I have to just say, all right, everyone go to their room, including myself, and we all just take a 5-minute timeout so that they stop fighting and so that I don't end up doing something that's going to scar them emotionally for the rest of their lives. Now, this was really hard because during this time, my son was into biting. He was acting out aggressively towards my daughter by biting her. And I'm talking like hard. Like blood would come out. In fact, he bit me too. He bit strangers. And, we could probably psychologically break it down and say, well, okay, this is a side effect of the divorce and he just wants attention, and yeah, okay, maybe that's true. But the reality was I had to deal with this issue now, and it was impeccably hard to try and not spank him when, he would make my daughter bleed, and there would be teeth marks, and it was awful. So luckily we've gotten past that phase. He does wrestle her to the ground still, but that's just more because he's a boy, he's physical. That's just what boys do. And yes, I'm gender stereotyping, so yeah, deal with it. And anyway, I will say this, boys and girls, there are definitely differences in their physical chemistry and the way they interact and think about things. It's very apparent at a young age, and so that is definitely true with my kids. So with that, I wanted to now transition over to some tactics that I have found to be quite helpful in dealing with naughty children so that you don't end up spanking them till your hand hurts. So number one, this tactic I use all the time, and I'll just call it the wall. And it's a special kind of a timeout. And what it is whenever my kids are being naughty, I tell them, all right, 2 minutes on the wall, you're in timeout. And the reason why I like this one, because they're still part of where we are. So if we're in the living room, kitchen area, I can still see him and he can still see me. So I don't want him to feel isolated, like he's shunned from society. It's not about shaming him. It's about stopping the behavior. That's what it is. I'm not trying to make it personal. I'm trying to make it I'm trying to improve the environment and just correct the behavior and not make my child feel like they're a bad person. I'm trying to make them understand that the behavior is not acceptable. And that's really, really hard to do, because even as adults, when we receive constructive criticism, it is very, very hard to not take it personally and say, oh, how dare you, John, your podcast sucks, like, oh man, I suck. I'm a terrible human being. No. I just need to do better at my podcast. So it is really hard to separate the emotion from the correction. And that's something that I actually didn't really get good at until I started working at Apple. They did a really good job in training everyone on doing constructive feedback, so that way you just focus on the behavior and not the person, and not making it personal. The next one that I want to share with you is when things start to escalate. This is also a form of timeout, but when they're being so belligerent, so naughty, they are refusing to do what you've asked them. They're not listening to you. They're throwing themselves on the ground, full on tantrum. There is screaming and weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then it gets to the point where you need to remove them from the area, from other people or the situation. If you're at home, then that typically could be their room, if they have their own room. I just tell them to go lay down on their bed. And sometimes instead of saying timeout, I'll say, you need to go take a rest. Sometimes there are keywords out there that you can say that will just trigger intense emotion from your child. So if you say the word timeout, they think, oh, bad, I'm in trouble. Maybe they're not bad or in trouble. Maybe they just need to take a little break. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they're just exhausted. Then try rephrasing it a little bit more. So you can say, hey, you know what? Oh, buddy, you're tired. Why don't you go take a little rest? and I'll go get your snuggles, and I'll tuck you in, and I'll get your blanket out, and then I'll give you a little kiss and a little hug, and that way they don't feel like they're the enemy of the state. They're just taking a little rest. So, and I'm going to call that redirecting. Redirecting your children is a great technique. In fact, that'll segue into my next thing. I try to avoid using the word no. I'm not a dream crusher. I don't like crushing my kids' dreams, and that actually comes from a very personal reason. Growing up, again, the youngest of 7, whenever I asked my parents for something, they would say no, and I got told no so many times. I just stopped asking for things. In fact, it has affected me so much that when my ex-wife and I were together, she would make me dinner, and I'd be like, "Whoa, you're making me dinner?" Like, that was a huge deal, because I just didn't expect things from anybody anymore. I stopped asking for help. In fact, to this day, I struggle a lot to ask help from people, because anytime I asked for things growing up, I just got stiff-armed every time. My parents were of the mindset of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, rub some dirt on it, and get over it. And why that's not always a bad thing for a very young, sensitive, emotional little boy, that just it really affected me a lot. And so I think about how I interact with my kids all the time, because I know the effect that it has on me now, and all the emotional issues that I'm dealing with now as an adult. I can trace it back to how my parents parented me, and it's kind of sad, actually. I'm like, oh man, I just want to go back to my young self and just hold him and say, it'll be okay, buddy, it's gonna get better, I promise. But alas, I don't have a time machine, so that's just not gonna happen. But again, going back to this idea of redirecting, try to find ways to redirect the conversation. So let's say you're about to head out the door and your kid asks you for something, like they want to watch a movie, or they want to have a snack, or they want to go play, but it's time to go. A tactic you can try to use is say, "Oh, I want to play." Like, "Oh, buddy, that's a great idea. You know what? Let's wait till we get home, and we'll go play." Or, "Oh, you want to watch a movie? That's wonderful. I want to watch a movie too. Let's wait till we get home and we eat dinner, and then we'll watch a movie together as a family." So that way you're not saying, "No, we're not going to watch a movie," or "No, we're not going to play." You're not shutting them down. You're acknowledging what they want, and then you're following through with that. And so they feel that you care about what they care about. And then that way they're going to feel like they can come to you. Again, I didn't feel like I could go to my parents for things. I kept pretty much to myself. I was pretty secretive about a lot of things in my life, because I just didn't feel like I had that strong of a relationship with my parents. And I don't want that relationship with my kids. I want them to feel like they can come to me and talk about whatever is on their mind, whether it's something they're excited about or something they're frustrated or scared about. So that starts now with anytime they come to me, that I don't shut them down. I acknowledge what they've said, how they're feeling, and that I redirect the conversation in a positive way, so that way they feel listened to and loved. So that's redirecting. Sometimes another tactic that I like to use is I like to ask them how they want to be disciplined. Now, I know that sounds kind of weird, but let me explain a scenario where I see a lot. So let's say my son is hitting my daughter, which is like basically every day. What I'll do is I'll say, "Nathan, buddy, you need to stop hitting your sister," and he'll keep hitting her, and then I'll say, "Do you need a timeout?" And then he'll say no, and then he'll stop hitting her. So in that sense, I gave him the option to choose. I empowered him to make the choice. instead of enforcing it and taking that choice away from him. So I'm actually empowering my child to use their God-given will to choose right from wrong. And that is the essence, my friends. The essence of parenting is not dominating your child, but sort of kind of nudging them in the right direction. There are some instances where you need to just literally grab your child and restrain them because they are just going buck wild and crazy, and they are past the point of reason. And that happens, and that's when you might need to consider using physical discipline or some type of physical restraint. But if you haven't gotten to red alert and everything is just falling to pieces, try to reason it out. Try to diffuse the situation before it comes into a bigger deal. Would be my advice on that. Okay. Now let's say things have escalated to the worst case scenario. They are just past all reason. Tears are flowing. Limbs are flailing. There's hitting. It's a mess. If you're in that situation, then in those very, very, very rare moments, would I actually encourage physical discipline? I want to say I tried to believe in the idea that there is never a good reason to hit your child, because that was true with my daughter. But then as my son got older, I'm like, okay, reasoning doesn't work with him. So I need to figure out something. So with him, most of the time, it's just physically grabbing him, picking him up, and setting him down over here. Just like lifting him off my daughter, because he's just like, I swear he's going to be a wrestler someday, because that's what he likes to do. He wrestles her, he wrestles me. That's just that's his love language, is physical affection, physical touch. He likes to hug and be held and grab you and push you. And I understand that, because it's the same love language as me. I like physical touch. I love being held and hugged and whatnot. In fact, we'll just take a quick tangent. So I forget the author of this book, but if you Google the 5 love languages, that's actually really... Maybe I can get him on this podcast. But basically he talks about the 5 love languages and how we feel love and how we show love. Because how we feel love and how we show love can be different. It could be the same, but it could also be different. But the 5 love languages are physical touch, gift giving, words of affirmation, quality time, and... oh, what's the last one? Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to Google it. Okay. Words of affirmation, physical touch, gift giving. Oh my gosh, this is killing me. Oh my gosh. Okay, Google it. But anyway, so my love languages are words of affirmation, which is like, hey, I really appreciate you and what you did for me. Or, wow, you did a really great job on that, John. That oh man, that just gets me to my core. That makes me feel acknowledged and loved, because I didn't always get that growing up. And the second one is physical touch. I love being touched. I love being held, being hugged, handshakes, just embraced. I love it all. It just sends fire through my body. It makes me feel loved and that everything's going to be okay. And that is and I actually show love in that way. So once I get to know a person a little bit and I, feel like we're pretty cool and we're on good terms, I'll say, oh, dude, put those hands away. We're on hugging terms. And so I'm like, bring it in, brothers don't shake hands. Brothers gotta hug. So that's definitely my philosophy and my personality and my style. But I'm also sensitive to others, that is not always the case. Now, going back to my kids, my son is my little clone. He is words of affirmation, physical touch all the way. So he's just like me in that scenario. Oh, gift giving. That was the last one. No, I thought I'd remember it. Gift giving. So words of affirmation, quality time, gift giving, physical touch, and... oh, maybe I didn't think of it. Oh, man, this is making me look bad. All right. Well, I'll just okay. Wait. Pause everything. It's gonna drive me crazy. I gotta look this up right now. I'm on my computer, and five love languages. Yep, we're doing a Google search on my podcast. That just happened. Oh, come on, internet. You got this. Oh man. Here we go. Words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. Woo! Okay. And the author is... Oh, man. I can't see it. So I don't know. Okay. Oh, Gary Chapman. There he is. Okay, so apologize for that little tangent there, but I do believe in that book. I've read through it and I've taken the quiz, but it was a long time ago, so that's why I couldn't remember it. So forgive me on that. And then going back to my daughter, she is all about quality time, and it's funny because that was also my ex-wife's love language, was quality time. So it's funny that the love languages of both my kids is passed on from the same gender as their parents. So my son after me, my daughter after my ex. And so my daughter feels loved when I spend time with her. And I think for guys, that tends to be a challenge. For example, when I would come home from work, as a lot of guys do, and when I did come home from work, I would just want to sit down and relax and just kind of unwind. And for me, that was like watching Netflix or playing video games or, doing something that I enjoyed, go on my phone, whatever. But my ex-wife, it was more like, oh, how was your day, honey? And let's talk and let's share feelings. And, guys just, for the most part, aren't always the best at that or don't want to do that or, fill in the blank. And so that's something to be aware of in your relationships with the people you love and with your children, is to be aware of their love language. How do they feel love and how do they show love? Is it the same? Is it different? Does it vary to different degrees in different situations? And you're going to go through times in your life where you're going to want and feel things in different ways and different intensities and different degrees. So let's go ahead and move on to the next little thought that I had. I have my iPad right here and I'm looking up my ideas. Okay, here's another tip for you guys. Learn the difference between fake tears and real tears. Kids love to cry. That is a very innate, built-in defense mechanism that they use to cope with stress and anxiety, is just let the tears flow. And it's something that they've known since they were born, because that's all they could do as newborn babies. And as they get older, they'll start to learn how to cope with things in different ways as their brain develops, their body develops. But for now, at least in my age range, 2 to 4, crying is still very much part of coping with their day-to-day activities. And so sometimes you have to be very good, almost a detective, if you will, of figuring out, okay, are these real tears or are these fake tears? Do I need to get angry? Do I need to discipline? Like, what's going on? Case in point, when my son wants to play video games, specifically Super Mario Odyssey, because we're on a Super Mario Odyssey kick right now, if he doesn't get to play, then it's like, oh, I want to play. And tears will come out of his eyes. I'm like, dang, I don't even know if I should be annoyed or impressed right now that you're able to squeeze those tears out. And then all I have to do is like, oh, buddy, let's go watch a movie, or let's go play. And then it'll go from to okay. And it's like, whoa, you just like flipped a switch. Like that was like a 180. And so in that instance, like, okay, those are just fake tears. So as you gain more experience, as you're with your kids more, you'll be able to differentiate between the fake tears and the real tears. And a lot of times you can sniff that out pretty quickly is if you use my tactic of redirecting. So if you change the subject, so instead of focusing on what they're begging and asking for, find something else that they really, really like and just whoop, redirect it. So that's a great tactic that I like to use. So in conclusion, I just want to encourage everyone out there to not judge each other with their parenting styles. I'm going to be doing a podcast later about that, but to just do the best you can. There's going to be a lot of books out there, a lot of specialists out there, and they're great. And I wish I would have made a list of all the books that are the best out there. But this will be an opportunity for you to do a little digging and research and just kind of see what's popular, what are people talking about. But what I really want to leave with you guys is the fact that you actually have the power to be a great parent, regardless of how you were raised. You have been surrounded by influences, positive influences your whole life. And even if you really did come from the worst parenting situation possible, you still, as an adult, have the power to change. You have the power to be the best parent that you can be. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort, as it did for me. It took me a few months to adjust my style so that I wasn't so explosive and wasn't so reactive and wasn't so physical with my kids. And now every time I'm with my children, I always think to myself, okay, how am I going to be nice daddy this weekend? How am I going to stop wasting time being angry and frustrated with them and start parenting effectively so we can diffuse the situations and really spend that quality time together? Because that's ultimately my goal. When you become a divorced single parent, you start to realize that your time with your children is extremely temporary. It's very finite, and you really start to appreciate every minute that you spend with your child. And so those are the thoughts that go through my mind as I approach each Daddy Day with my children. Yes, I call it Daddy Days. So keep up the good work. If you are struggling with parenting, shoot me an email. Let's talk. What are some ideas that you guys have come up with? I'm interested to hear. You can engage in the conversation by going to my Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook or Twitter social media, or you can shoot me an email at bravedadnow@gmail.com. So join in on the conversation, and let's talk about your parenting triumphs and your parenting woes. So thank you for listening to this episode's podcast, How to Not Strangle Your Kids, episode 5. And thanks again for tuning in. And you've been listening to the Brave Dad Now podcast, where we're seeking to inspire and uplift men and dads around the world.